All. This is Dr. Mubin Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So if you would like to have more good medical lectures, visit drbeen.com. Now, the study today is a very interesting study. Once one of the vaccine injured patient, she said to me that I try to continue to exercise and try to keep my muscles active so I don't lose them. I go for physiotherapy, and even then, I am developing more and more muscle wasting, and I'm gaining more and more fats. I'm getting more fatty, and I have less muscles. This is a common problem for many of the patients. So I wanted to make sure that this most common problem of fatigue and muscle weakness, both in long COVID and vaccine injured, at least we understand one of the mechanisms and see how to manage that. So, what you'll get today is number one, the mechanism that the researchers observed for muscle weakness and fatigue. Secondly, the labs that can be done to kind of diagnose this problem. And thirdly, the management of it. Now, to be fair, the management is a lot from me and less from the researchers. So I'll tell you what part is from the researchers and what is my addition. So these are gifts for humanity and they are continuing. So let's look at so this is drbeen.com. And this is the study. Reduced muscle strength with long COVID-19 syndrome is mediated by limb muscle mass. And you may have actually noticed that long COVID patients or vaccine injury patients have thinning muscles. You may have seen this in diabetics as well. And you may have seen this in some endocrine abnormalities too, especially the abnormalities with steroids, that the limbs, the arms and the legs, they start becoming thin and wasted, and fat starts accumulating on the trunk or the axis of the body. Now, especially fat also gets accumulated on the visceral areas or around the viscera too, which is a more stubborn and more dangerous fat. So let's look at this study's analysis. So here is the study. What they found was, and what we all know now, long COVID and vaccine injury. The most common symptom is fatigue. And of course, the fatigue can be neurological and or muscular too. So in this particular case, long COVID and vaccine injury, majority of the cases are because of the muscle weakness as well, but a lot of neurological contribution too. Even hematological contribution, the vascular narrowing and the clotting also reduces the blood flow and oxygen flow to various muscles and to brain, which then in turn will cause fatigue and weakness. Then there is in this study, they found there was sarcopenia of the patient. Sarcopenia means the damage to the muscle, the damaged muscle, the weak muscle, the wasted muscle is called sarcopenic muscle. And they also observed sarcopenic obesity. What that means is that the thinning limbs, arms and legs becoming thin and weak and less performant, but at the same time, the fats accumulating around the belly and even the back, even the viscera. So that is sarcopenic obesity. Then they observed the decreased muscle strength. They observed less muscle performance. They also saw that the muscle issues, the weakness, the fatigue occurred even in mild to moderate COVID-19 patients, even in those patients who were not hospitalized. So this is not a problem of only the severe cases. This can occur in mild to moderate cases as well. So what happens is, in general, there are two primary problems. Number one, the muscle gets damaged. And why does the muscle gets damaged? There are many, many reasons, but a simple and very straightforward reason is that muscles have a lot of ACE2 receptors on them. And COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 can bind with ACE2. And remember from the COVID time, if you remember that TMPRSST, an enzyme next to the ACE2 is also needed to prime the spike protein of the long COVID, of the SARS-CoV-2. Muscles not only have ACE2 on them, they also have TMPRSS2. So that is a perfect structure to allow the infection of the muscle. The more dangerous part is that the myoblasts are blast cells or the parent cells that are sitting in every muscle, which give rise to new muscle fibers. So as some muscle fibers get damaged, or as you use the muscles and more muscle fibers are needed, the myoblasts can actually help generate new muscle fibers. When myoblasts are infected and destroyed, then the muscle's ability to produce new fibers under stress is reduced. So not only the muscle is getting damaged and the muscle fibers are becoming less, or they are becoming fibrosed, which is a kind of a scarring to the damaged muscle, but new muscle fiber formation is really going to become very slow because the myoblasts have reduced in number. This is why for long COVID patients and for vaccine injury patients, getting back towards strength is a longer process because they have to work with smaller number of myoblasts. Another issue is the mitochondrial damage. So when the mitochondria get damaged, then the muscle wasting starts occurring as well, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. So I'm going to present the solution first. And this is the part, these two slides that I'm going to present is something that you should keep in mind if there is somebody who is experiencing fatigue and weakness. Maybe send them the screenshots. If it is you, please have these handy. So first of all, the labs. In the long COVID and vaccine injury both, in this particular study, what they found was that the inflammatory molecules were increased. C-reactive protein was increased. Interleukin 6 was increased. Tumor necrosis factor alpha was increased. Interleukin 1 beta was increased. So CRP is the most important one for inflammation to measure. IL-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha can be measured as well as diagnosis. Then body mass index. So the composition of the body, where you would see that patient's muscle mass is how much, and compared to a healthy individual of the same size and weight and age, is this comparable or not? So the muscle mass index is tested. And then sarcopenia, there is a protocol, there is a criteria to look for sarcopenia as well. So sarcopenia should be tested as well. So these are the labs. Now solution, what do this patient do who has gotten muscle wasting happening in the limbs and who is accumulating fats or is gaining weight, especially on the belly area, especially around the viscera, around the organs within the abdominal cavity? Resistance training to start getting the muscles back towards normal. Now, I had done this study, one other study before as well, in which researchers looked at the muscle fiber composition. This study actually looked at that as well and said that the muscles moved from, some fibers of the muscles moved from oxidative phosphorylation, that is using oxygen and using that to make energy, towards glycolysis, where they're just using glucose without oxygen. The problem is that the oxidative muscles are more resistant to fatigue. These are the kind of muscles that are present in our neck and in our back. You hold up your head the whole day long and your neck doesn't become tired. But when the muscle fiber type starts changing towards more glycolytic fibers, these fibers do not use oxygen that much. They use glucose. They produce lots of lactic acid and creatinine. And the result is that they fatigue fast. In general, all of our muscles, skeletal muscles, have a mixture of fast fatiguing and slow fatiguing fibers. However, in these patients, the fast fatiguing fibers, their percentage starts increasing. Because of that, even these patients would have problems staying upright because the back muscles will fatigue early. They would have problem keeping their head up the whole day long because the neck muscles are now getting the fiber type switched, which is also causing a problem. So how do they get back to on track? Here are the things to do. Number one, resistance training, progressively, very slowly starting to do exercises. You have to do exercises. Otherwise muscles would continue to change their shape and get wasted. Aerobic exercises, those exercises that increase the blood flow to the muscles, and these are the exercises that increase the heart rate as well. So aerobic exercises, once again, low to moderate intensity and then slowly increasing. Aerobic exercises are also very good for mitochondria and mitochondrial health as well. So that is one, muscle. Then is the mitochondrial rehabilitation. This problem that is happening in the muscles, there I'm going to look at the causes a little later, but mitochondrial damage because of inflammation or directly damaged because of the infection or spike protein can then cause the muscle damage. So how do you get mitochondria back on track? So CoQ10 is a mitochondrial complex. So that is very important. It gets used up in a damaged mitochondria and then reactive oxygen species start leaking out. So CoQ10 is very important. Alpha lipoic acid is very important for mitochondrial health. Acetyl L-carnitine is a very important enzyme that is necessary to shuttle the fats from outside of the mitochondria to inside of the mitochondria so that these fats can be burnt. Now, please remember this. This is the most important part of this whole lecture. If somebody is getting muscle wasting and is getting fat accumulation, they must take, and if you suspect that this may be long COVID or vaccine injury, they must take, with their doctor's advice, of course, acetyl L-carnitine. This enzyme helps move fats into the mitochondria to allow the fat burning to happen to keep the fat balance corrected. Then PQQ, which is pyrroloquinoline quinone, this allows to make new mitochondria. So mitochondrial new generation, mitochondrial synthesis is triggered by PQQ. Then omega-3. Omega-3 is not only anti-inflammatory, which would help reduce mitochondrial damage by reducing inflammation, but remember, omega-3 would help produce better cell membranes, and the membrane is also needed for the new mitochondria and for the damaged mitochondria. So membrane health is improved with omega-3. So must take omega-3, again, with doctor's advice. All of this is not a medical advice. This is a recommendation to discuss with your doctor. Then polyphenols, resveratrol, curcumin, quercetin, and then NAD precursors, NAD and FADH2 are also mitochondrial complexes. Now, curcumin is such an important anti-inflammatory substance that we should all have it. And either curcumin in warm milk, because curcumin does not absorb otherwise easily, or if somebody cannot take milk because of lactose intolerance, then curcumin with a tiny amount of black pepper, ground black pepper. Black pepper increases the absorption of curcumin by about 1,000 times. Then for mitochondria, photobiomodulation. I have done a complete lecture about the photobiomodulation for the mitochondrial health. So generally, methylene blue and photobiomodulation, the near infrared light, they both have a very interesting effect on mitochondria. Methylene blue is actually even more interesting than infrared, near infrared, but the near infrared light can shine directly, can penetrate our body up to 4 inches, can shine directly onto the complex 4 of the mitochondria. And the complex 4 of mitochondria can work with light, just like plants have chlorophyll that allows them to work with light and directly create energy. Similarly, our complex 4 of mitochondria can directly work with near infrared light and use that to start producing energy. So, near infrared light, which is either the lamp, or you can go out in the morning and evening when the sun is rising or setting, so it's not overhead. At that time, in the sunlight, near infrared light is more than the other kinds of light rays. Penetrate clothes as well. So, near infrared light, methylene blue is very good. Methylene blue can actually not only work with the complex 4, but it can also work with the complex 2 and 3 as well. So methylene blue has even complex 1. So methylene blue has its own beneficial effect. So mitochondrial health and the muscle training to get back is very, very important. If you don't do it, you will continue to lose muscle mass and you would continue to gain fats. Why fats? It's not that the muscle mass that you lost is becoming converted into fat, but rather the loss of muscle is an indicator of the abnormality with the mitochondria, which the mitochondrial damage is responsible for fat gain. Do you know why it is responsible for fat gain? We'll discuss that in a second. So the question now is, why do muscles become weak? Why do they start becoming damaged? Why do you start getting muscle mass reduction? There are multiple mechanisms. So let me see some of them with you. Number one, as we said, direct invasion of the virus into the muscle and especially into the myoblast, reducing, number one, damaging the muscle, and number two, reducing the muscle's ability to regenerate new fibers. Secondly, cytokine storm, the interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, all of them, when these molecules enter the muscle, they cause the muscle proteins to become ubiquitinated. That means they cause them to become recycled and damaged and destroyed. Then, as I said before, mitochondrial dysfunction, which happens either directly because of the spike protein and the virus or because of the inflammation that is in the environment. What happens is ATP production is reduced, reactive oxygen species production is increased, glycolysis or breakdown of the glucose increases, reduced oxidative fibers, the fatigable fibers increase, and durable fibers or less fatigable fibers reduce. So someone is saying sounds like AIDS. This is just a very strange latest trend to try to equate long COVID or vaccine injury to AIDS. There is no comparison between the pathologies of these two and the treatment for these two. Symptomatically, one can become weak in many kinds of diseases. Now, next is neurological. So neurologically, a person can become, muscles can become weak as well. So there is a thing called central effect where our brain sends messages to the muscles to move them. And if brain is inflamed, it may not be able to send the messages correctly. Similarly, the second is peripheral effect, where the nerves are taking the messages to the muscles, plus the nerves that are working with the spinal cord are creating a specific tone in the muscles. And if those nerves are damaged, then that would also cause an issue with the muscle movement or tone. And finally, neuromuscular junction, that is where the nerve kind of connects with the muscle. That junction can be damaged or inflamed as well, which can then cause muscle movement issues, fatigue and pain and weakness. So neurological issues can cause this problem. Then disuse atrophy or deconditioning of the muscle. This is when we are not able to move, and the more we do not move, the more the muscle wasting occurs. This is called deconditioning. And then nutrient imbalances that can cause further damage to the muscle as well, either during the disease that we were not able to eat well, or afterwards where we either eat more or less, but the nutrients are not correct. So So muscle loss and decreased immunity were hallmarks. So many diseases cause muscle loss and decreased immunity. That doesn't mean every disease that does it is HIV. This the pathogenesis is different. Symptoms can be very common. The problem, let me just very quickly address this. If you see majority of the diseases in our body have one final common pathway to show their symptoms, and that is inflammation. In the case of HIV, inflammation actually reduces because the immune system is compromised. In the case of these diseases, long COVID or vaccine injury, inflammation actually increases. I just did a study two videos ago. I did a video where I discussed that how much inflammation is produced that causes dysregulation of the immune system and incorrect behavior of the immune system attacking our body. That has nothing to do with HIV. It's not even close to that. Okay, so study very quickly. This is a cross-sectional study. It is a secondary analysis. That means there was a bigger study going on, and then they took some data from it and did one more analysis on that. This analysis was specifically done to figure out mediation of the muscle mass reduction in fatigue, weakness, and pain. What does this mean? They wanted to understand that the long COVID patients who have reduced muscle mass, how much of that muscle mass reduction is contributing to the weakness, fatigue, and pain. Generally, what they found was that in the absolute grip strength or leg extension strength, there was definitely a difference, which was almost half. So a person healthy of the same age, same size, same build, same altitude would have double the muscle strength compared to this person who has long COVID. On the other hand, when they did the relative indexing is to see the total muscle mass or total mass of the body, and then the strength of the grip or the leg extensions, and then to see what is that strength. So the strength relative to the mass. Then there was about 11 to 25% reduction. So in absolute numbers, there was about 50% reduction. And then in the relative numbers, there was about 11 to 25% reduction, but there was definitely reduction. That is called mediation. That part of reduction in muscle performance and strength, how much of that part is given because of the muscle damage? Anywhere from 11 to 25% compared to one's own body size, or about half compared to another person. So then where did the rest of the weakness come from? Here are all the other mechanisms: cytokine storm, mitochondrial dysfunction, neurological issues, disuse, atrophy, nutrients, and so on. They observed in this study that fatigue was the most common, then headache and brain fog, then muscle pain and weakness. They saw that the muscle mass was reduced, strength was reduced, and the body fat, especially visceral fat, was increased. So finally, this is the last slide. Why was the fat increased? We can understand why the muscle was reduced. Why was the fat increased? So here are some of the reasons why the fat is increased in these patients. Number one, inactivity. So as the muscles start becoming weak, the legs and arms, their activities proportionally start becoming reduced, which would then cause fat accumulation because the energy that they're taking has to go somewhere. Secondly, inflammation. Inflammation causes insulin resistance. Insulin resistance in turn causes increased glucose levels in the body because that glucose is not being taken up by the cells. Plus, on the fatty tissue, on the fat cells, insulin's behavior is to do lipogenesis and to reduce fat utilization. So insulin resistance because of inflammation will cause weight gain. Then increased cortisol levels in the body, the stress hormone levels, which are because of the acute infection and then the chronic inflammation. The increased cortisol increases the visceral fat. So you may actually know the patients who have a lot of cortisol issues, they would actually develop moon face and buffalo hump and truncal obesity. Now, interestingly, visceral fat is also deposited because of tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6 as well, which is part of the inflammation. Then, damaged mitochondria. One function of the mitochondria is to pick up the free fatty acids and take them inside the mitochondria and then burn them to produce ATP. That is the fat burning that is happening within the mitochondria. If the mitochondria is damaged, then the fat burning reduces and the free fatty acids that are present would go and get stored somewhere, and that would also cause fat accumulation. Then the person may start overeating because of stress, and then some of the medicines can also cause weight gain, for example, corticosteroids. So all of those reasons together can lead to fat accumulation while the muscle damage is happening as well. So this is the discussion. So if you know someone with fatigue, muscle pain, weakness, and fat accumulation, show them the study or show them this video and show them the possibility for diagnosis and for management. So with this, thank you very much. So for us, is this Dr. Bean's explanation or the paper's conclusion? Just the for us, just the part where I said for mitochondrial health, paper simply said we should have interventions targeted towards mitochondrial health, and we should have patients work with exercise. That is what they said. I added a list of things that would be for mitochondrial health. Now, for the fat accumulation, they do talk about mitochondrial damage leading to fat. I just provided a more exhaustive mechanism for that as well. So, Michelle, you have to watch my previous video where I discussed that the T cell count drop means what in the context of vaccine injury or long COVID. The T helper memory cell count reduction was actually because of the overstimulation of the immune system, which reduced the age of these cells. Very different mechanism, and it is not AIDS. So we'll see if there are more studies that come in that say it is AIDS. So far, if T helper cells were reduced like they were in AIDS, which causes T helper cells or T cells to be reduced and B cells to be reduced, then you will not have unswitched B cells producing IgM, because that is an example of overstimulated B cells by the T helper cells. And you would not have cytotoxic T cell producing tumor necrosis factor alpha increased and exhausted, because that is also an example of overstimulation. This is a problem of overstimulation and dysregulation of the immune system, and not an AIDS-like problem. And this is why I become so unhappy with such incorrect mechanisms established for vaccine injury or long COVID, which allows the mainstream medicine folks to say, you guys are crazy, you don't even know what you're talking about. And that is how these problems stay masked, because we keep trying to fantasize them into the unknown realities. The truth itself is quite damaging. The immune system's picture that is present without connecting to AIDS, that itself is pretty detrimental for the patient. And you have seen how they become disabled and how they become less healthy over time. So with this, thank you very much. And please like, subscribe, and share. If you like to support this work, there are links in the description to support this work. Best is to go get drbeen.com access, where you can get CMEs as well. I would see you the next time. Bye for now.